This thing live, Nicholas?
I hope so, man.
Are we live?
I think so.
2024, Nicholas, is come and gone in a flash. And I'm not going to dilly-dally around too long because we have quite the show, but I do have something I want to tell you, Nicholas. You ready? I don't know if you can handle this.
I probably can't.
I take my whiskey neat. Yeah, we're getting ham sauce for tonight's episode, baby. Look at that. That's a full 2 fingers of bourbon right there, baby.
Very nice, very nice. Very appropriate for what we are doing tonight.
Yeah, let's go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of all ages. TLDR Studios proudly presents to you the greatest, and I mean the greatest, the happiest, the funnest, the most celebrated podcasting team in the world. He's the comic book writer, Nick Friar. I'm your friendly neighborhood backcracker, Dr. Joe, and together we are the TLDR Comic Book Club, baby. How's it going, Friar?
I should change. I would change my name on this, like for people who watch on the stream, but I feel like that would fuck up some people a little bit here and there, and I don't want to. I don't want to do that. They're gonna start thinking I actually legally changed my name. But yeah, I'm just Dandy Joe because today we are doing one of our favorite things of the year. We are doing the floppies. We already did the gift guide. The holidays have come and gone. Well, I think some holidays may be going on still. Obviously, we got New Year's coming up. But the way we usher in 2025 is we kick off award season for everybody. We beat out all the movie guys. We beat out all the TV guys. We get the ball rolling. We are ahead of all the comics awards as well. The floppies, as Joe named them in 2024, start with our TLDR annual. This is actually our 5th one. We did one in 2020 in our first year. I like looking back at it. I'm kind of like, I'm stunned that we did that in our first year just because we were like so, although I guess we did our first interview with Scott that year too, right? We started off regimented, but then it just got out of control really fast.
Yeah, real fast. And the dynamic of the show changed a bit, and I think that first year was a lot of fun. And I wouldn't say that we had any rough patches or anything like that, but I think over the past 5 years, at least I've gone from streaming this show on a stupid Microsoft Surface Pro and some terrible Apple earphones to now. I've got OnlyFans lighting up in this bitch for Pete's sake, right? I got a green screen. I got a good mic. My graphics game has upped. For those watching, you'll see behind us, and you might have noticed on the socials, right? I tweaked the logo a little bit, and as I told Nicholas, when I was doing this, I said, we'll sort of usher it in the new year, right?
Mm-hmm.
New year, new logo, same 2 dipshits.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. Yeah, and I love what you've done with it too, and obviously this is great, audio podcasting for everybody. But you guys will see if you follow us on all of our socials, whether that's Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram. I don't know where else for socials. We never push the socials. It's always our audio channels because those are the only places that you're going to find our Friar Side chats. And those are our conversations with creators across the industry. We will talk about that more as we reflect on this year because we talked to a lot of people as expected, a lot of creators that we had not had on the show previously. But reflecting, that's for a little bit later on in the program, Joe, just to give everybody a little rundown of how this thing's going to go in case this is your first time with the floppies. We are still going to hit on the new comics coming out this week because there are a lot of comics still coming out, surprisingly, with New Comic Book Day falling on New Year's Day. But we're going to hit on those, some big ones there, and then we're going to get into a little bit of reflection for the show, specifically on some of the recommendations that we've made, a little look ahead to 2025. Then we will get to our awards and then any other odds and ends in terms of like larger reflection or smaller reflection that we want to get to. We'll save that for the end if time allows. But we got a lot to get to. Do you have anything in terms of catching up as we get going?
Yeah, real quick. I caught up on the latest issue of Minky Woodcock. The Girl Called Cthulhu. That series is wild, and I absolutely love it. It's the most pulp, bizarre thing I've read, and I'm here for it. And then I finally caught up on the first 2 issues of Exorcism at 1600 Pen.
Ooh.
And that book is tremendous. That is a TLDR book. I will be discussing it. I think it's 4 issues, and I think the last one doesn't come out till March or April, right? So some time in between. But man, the first issue was real thick too. It was a long one. It was almost like a double issue. And it's a great sort of like political horror thriller dealing with obviously exorcism. So that was an excellent read, catching up on. But speaking of books that I've read, Nicholas, this is one of my favorite parts of the floppies that we've done over the past few years. So I keep track of the number of comics I read, and I would say this number is within the ballpark, within maybe a few issues, right? Because sometimes I just forget to tally an issue here or there, but for the most part, I'm pretty on it. So, books I've read, number of books I've read in the year of our Lord 2024. I have read 835 comics. Last year, I read 869, so a little off my pace from last year. 2022, Nicholas, I only plowed through 752 comics. So down year for me. But in 2021, when I first started logging this, 949.
Yeah.
I was 51 books shy of 1,000. Holy shit. Yeah. I look back now, I was like, I don't know how I did that. I think I was reading a ton of trades, like that was like the second year doing this. So like I didn't really have full access to the review copies that we have now. So I was going back, reading a lot of trades, discovering books to read. So I think that's probably what does that. But what surprised me was I compared this year to last year, especially with some of the big three books. So Image, I always read a ton of Image. This year I read 273 Image books. Last year was 262. So a slight uptick there.
Nice.
Marvel, huge uptick. In 2023, I only read 76 Marvel books. This year I read 126.
Wow. Yeah, that's
big uptick, but a slight downtick on DC. Last year I read 133. This year only 103. Mm-hmm. Now, I think a big part of that was DC was going through some changes this year, so they were slowed down a bit through parts of the year where they weren't pumping out as much stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Dark Horse had an uptick, went from 59 to 74, but boom, a downtick, right? I went from 83 down to 59. I mean 58.
Yeah, I feel like that one was one that we saw less from them.
Yeah, we did. Right. Mm-hmm. And we've mentioned that a few times throughout the year. Like there were some weeks where they're only putting out one or two books. So
yeah.
Mad Cave, I didn't keep track of last year. I read 55 books from them.
Nice.
Dynamite. This might be one of the biggest upgrades. I went from reading 2 Dynamite books to 32. Right?
Yes.
AWA, they just really didn't put out a ton of books this year. So down there. I read less Vault books, surprisingly enough. So like I
felt like there was less Vault this year as well.
There was less Vault. And like in 2023, I read 68 books that I considered other, while this year is only 27. But I think part of that 68 is Mad Cave, was Titan, was Ablaze, things like that this year I sort of parsed out. So
sure.
Yeah, quite the skew with some of those publishers there. IDW right about the same ballpark. I went from 34 to 30, so like I consider that like pretty much even. So
yep,
good stuff.
Yeah, so IDW and Image were the ones that pretty much stayed the same for you.
Yeah.
By and large, and everything else had some significant fluctuation. But it seems like a lot of it was, I mean, I think looking at what you're reading, like look at your breakdown, Joe, it really is like a representation of just how we feel about each publisher, throughout the course of the year. I do think DC finished out the year really strong, but yes. I do think we generally liked a lot more Marvel stuff, and I think that's because, like, by and large, Benjamin Percy did a lot this year. Where he was really pushing the envelope, getting things a little more adult on the titles that he was working on. We'll talk about it, one of his new titles, in a little bit, but this is fascinating to see this full breakdown. And again, you're coming in at 835, a little bit less than last year, but it seems like, I would say if we were setting, the DSG Sportsbook over under on how many floppies Doc reads in 2025, the line would probably be at I would say 845, maybe 850 and a half, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I can also consider that pretty much like back-to-back years on par, right? Because there's any number of variables for that. And some of that is some of these publishers that I normally read a ton of didn't put out as much volume. I mean, it could be the difference of if AWA puts out 50 books instead of 20. That's the difference right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? And also like the first year you started tracking this, you had like an adjustment with work too. So like there was like you
Oh
had all
yeah,
that's why it allowed you to read more. And
yeah.
then
That's probably it. To be honest with you,
that's
I
probably why
was
you had the dip in 2022 as well.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Look at that. It is when I started working again.
Yeah.
That's
There you go. So
why we keep you around, Nicholas.
it's funny how that shit kind of works. But I've never been one to do this, but like my wife does Goodreads and tracks all her stuff there. And then you're doing this. Like, I don't know. I'm starting like the way because Joe didn't just track his own books here. He's also doing a lot of tracking throughout the course of the year. He started doing it last year, but big time, even that you shared your notes with me this year of just all the books in preparation for award season. I definitely have stuff that's top of mind, but as I was going back through this, I was like, I'm happy with all the decisions that I made, but I'm also like, I need to do a better job of note keeping throughout the course of the year, and I may consider doing even this what you're doing because this is fun to see what you're doing at the end of the year.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun reflection. Sort of looking back and being like, holy shit. Like I told Violet how many comic books I read, and she goes, "Whoa!" And then what do you think my wife said? She says, "You could have been doing something a lot more useful than that with your time."
Oh, how could she? Oh, when I see her next, oh my goodness. Oh wow,
Mm.
we're gonna have to move up a dinner for the four of us soon
She's
because I have a bone to pick with her now.
she's not wrong, Nicholas.
Listen, reading is knowledge, and we can't read. You can't read enough fiction. I
That is
mean, come
right.
on. All right, so that's awesome. So great stuff there. We will get to the floppies and additional reflection in a bit, but let's take a quick sidestep and talk about what's new this week in comics. Joe, Marvel's got a lot of stuff out this week. Why don't we start there?
Okay, so from Marvel, these are books that drop on New Year's Day. I will tell everyone because it's been like this the last few weeks, especially with Lunar and especially with these holidays dropping on Wednesdays.
Especially with Dynamite.
Right? Books have not been coming out like on time. Like I went to Newbury Comics and I went on Friday and last Friday, and there was another issue with Lunar where half the I would say 2/3 of the comics out that week weren't on the comic book shelves. So just pay attention if your books aren't there. Talk to talk to the person at your shop. Make sure they hold them aside for you if you can't get there right away or whatnot. Lunar like distribution this year I think has been probably the best it's been in years. But the last month it's been pretty much since Thanksgiving. There's been a lot more kerfluffles, so to speak, with deliveries and stuff being on time. So just keep a heads up.
I said Dynamite. I meant to say Diamond. I always do that for some
Oh,
reason. I
no,
always
yeah,
think
yeah,
they're the
yeah.
same company, but Diamond's the one that I've been hearing is having all the issues. Like they're it's unfortunate. This time of year is not ideal, especially because like this is a great time to like get like you and I both buy gifts for our nephews. Like I've been buying the same ones for my nephews over the last few years, but still, like this is an important time of year to have all that stuff stocked up. This is a great time for like kids to get into comics when you don't have like necessarily a superhero movie dropping at any given time. So
Yeah.
not ideal. Hopefully they get stuff figured out, but yeah, there's definitely
Yeah.
things resolved on that end.
Last week there was not a single DC or Image book on the shelf.
I don't understand. Yeah, I
Not that
don't.
there was a ton out, anyways, but still, like there was a ton of stuff. The shelves were
Well,
virtually
I
empty
mean,
for
Absolute
new
Wonder
releases.
Woman 3 was last week, right? I know we just like I remember
Yeah.
talking about it. Was that last week? Yeah, I mean that's a
Yeah.
pretty big book to not have, when
Mm-hmm.
people need it. I mean, I'm sure most people weren't going to the comic shop on Christmas
But I
Day.
went on Friday, and
Yeah,
it still
see, yeah,
wasn't in, right?
yeah,
So,
that's
heads up, folks. That's all I'm saying. It's a PSA from the DOC. So from Marvel, we have the Ultimates issue 8, Miles Morales Spider-Man issue 28, the Avengers issue 22, Daredevil issue 17, the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 11, X-Force issue 7, X-Factor issue 6, Spider-Gwen the Ghost Spider issue 9, Werewolf by Night issue 6, Samuel Wilson Captain America issue 1, Ahsoka issue 7, What If Galactus Transformed Hulk. And I didn't get a chance to read Marvel today, but you did, Nicholas. There's 2 number ones you would like to discuss. Kick us off, baby.
Yeah, man. I couldn't wait to check out Deadpool Wolverine issue 1 from friend of the show Benjamin Percy with art by Joshua Cassar. Ben told us about this when we talked to him. I can't remember if it was on air or off air, but it was just like, holy shit, I cannot wait because like we can't get enough of him doing Wolverine. He's done an outstanding job, so much so that he's even kicking ass with Dakin. He had the miniseries, he's now doing the the ongoing series. But here's like, okay, I feel like we saw some Deadpool. He did X-Force. he's done stuff with Deadpool, but I didn't read X-Force, so I'm like, okay, how is this gonna go? How like I didn't have any doubts, but I was just curious. Prime Deadpool antics, like right off the rip, just some great stuff, some great chicanery, and like what I really like is we've talked before about the team up stuff, versus stuff that we get in comics, and when you're dealing with the big two, it's always like, if it says versus, it's like, is it really though? Like maybe for like 2 seconds. I praised Uncanny X-Men for that recently and how they got like a good like versus element in there, and it wasn't necessarily fully advertised as a versus element with the Uncanny X-Men and the Jed McKay and Stegman's X-Men. With this, I didn't know what to expect from a versus. It felt more like a team up, but we have like a nice blend of versus and kind of teaming up. And it's like a la, what happened in Deadpool and Wolverine, the movie. But at the same time, it'll feel familiar, but it's very different from what we got in the movie too. So I really like how like Ben made it his own, and it really worked well. And then there's also like this big reveal at the end of a new player. So it's really promising first issue. Exactly what we expected from Ben. Not a spoiler at all. You won't, Joe. I can give you a million guesses. You will have no fucking clue. Then we move over to Cable, Love and Chrome, issue 1 by David Pepose, who I've talked about a lot with the Devil That Wears My Face. And then the artist is Mike Henderson. And we get a whole lot of badassery that you'd expect from a Cable book. And then Cable, of course, is in this time jump, always dealing with time travel in some capacity. And he stumbled upon something very specific and peculiar, and I love it. Like and I won't say more than that. But there's another twist in there that I'm not used to seeing in a Cable story. I can't recall. I don't think we've ever seen one. And maybe from the title you could figure something out. But I really liked it. It was a nice choice, and I'm very curious to see how that evolves over the course of this series. So Cable, Love and Chrome, issue 1, and Deadpool, Wolverine, issue 1. Some awesome first issues dropping on. It's an interesting move to have these drop on New Year's Day, because I think it's like Marvel making a bit of a power play. Like, hey, these are things that people are going to pick up. Like, you got to go. You can't. You got to make sure you get this stuff on despite the holiday.
Nice.
All right. Let's see. So we got from DC this week. We got Batman issue 156, Poison Ivy 29, Batgirl issue 3, Birds of Prey issue 17, Justice Society of America issue 3, Shazam issue 19, Batman Full Moon issue 3, Two-Face issue 2. I know you didn't want to break it down, but second, you were praising the first issue.
Excellent.
Second issue? Nice.
Excellent.
And you have dibs on this one, right?
Oh, you betcha, baby.
Okay, good. Justice League, the Atom Protector issue 1. This is my friend of the show, Ryan Parrott and John Ridley, with Mike Perkins on the art. I'm very excited to check this one out. Didn't get to it this week. DC Horror presents Creature Going Commandos issue 4. What? Is it supposed to say Creature Commandos?
I'm Ron Burgundy. You did it. Yeah, I snuck that in there for you, baby.
That was deliberate?
That was deliberate.
Okay, I was going to say, why did I say going? Oh, because Going Commando. Got it. Okay.
There we go. He gets it.
Okay. Have you watched that show yet? You don't watch anything. What am I talking about? I
don't watch anything. You name it, I watch it. Name something.
Have you watched The Penguin?
No, I've not.
It's like the one of the top shows of the past.
I watched Arcane. No. I finally watched Arcane.
Ooh, how was it? Did you like it?
Excellent.
Both seasons?
I'm halfway through the second.
Nice.
I tell you, it is one of the most beautiful things I have ever watched. Like, it's very Shakespearean in its storytelling, but the artwork is in the animation just absolutely blow me away. I mean, I put it up there with the Spider-Verse stuff in terms of quality.
I think that's I think some people might find that bold. I agree with you 100%. Like, the animation has been next level, man. The fight sequences, like, this is what I want to see. Like, I want to see this in all, like, comic booky action, sci-fi, all these different things. Like, obviously Arcane is League of Legends, so it's video games, but still, I want to see some like action that I can't see in live action. I want, like, give me that shit, and they deliver on that so much here. All right, awesome. Wayne Family, we can do a whole episode on Arcane.
We could.
Wayne Family Adventures, issue 145, and then Joe, possibly the book of the week.
Possibly. I'll tell you what. This is absolute Superman issue 3. Yeah, I mean, you didn't read the number one from Boom. And you're not reading Batman Full Moon or Two-Face. So like I think if for you to say that, I would say, yeah, I agree with you. But like
Oh
the other three
wow.
books are also like DC really killed it this week. Even Batman 156, like all four of the Batman books or all four of the DC books I read this week were stellar. But Absolute Superman definitely stood out to me because this one was a bit of a departure from the first two issues. Because we didn't get any present day Superman. This was all essentially, a retelling of the origin story of Krypton, right? Going to shit.
Hmm.
and so like I just love how it's being sort of retold,
Yeah.
right? And the changes they've made and everything that's going into who young Kal-El is, who his parents are, um, how the destruction of Krypton is coming about. How there's just so many great layers that I think makes it a little bit better than the traditional origin story of Krypton blowing up. Right.
Hmm.
So I absolutely loved this issue. The writing's fantastic. The artwork continues to be fantastic. To me, this was the best issue of that series. And I put it right up there with any of the Wonder Woman issues I've read so far.
Yeah, it's definitely the best issue of this series so far. So much so that I was almost thinking like, this might move it to. I know you already have it at number two. I have it at number three, but it's like I'm not making that move on moving it up to number two in my absolute titles over at DC in the power rankings. But it's right there, man, and moving up to number like this was a big jump for me because
Mm-hmm.
obviously like this story has a lot of heart and it's very like I very much felt the frustration that we were dealing with throughout this issue. And like it's all been kind of it's been there in the first two issues. So it wasn't like you're right, it was a departure because we don't get any of the modern day stuff, but it like the stage has been set. And then obviously like we get to the like there's a whole other element, this whole other like evolution, like you said, it's a retelling and reframing of this story. Like there's a pretty big development that we just like didn't see that coming. Also, and I love it when this happens. I didn't need it. It was a great issue. We
Yeah.
didn't need that to happen, but I love that because now like I'm still reflecting on this, but when I go into this next issue, I'm 100% going to be thinking about this way this thing ended. This
Yeah.
Absolute Superman issue 3.
Yeah, this was just it was a brilliant issue, and I loved everything about it from the first to the last panel.
Yeah, awesome stuff. We got let me take us through these other ones so you can catch your breath and break down the Boom book that you want to talk about. So from Vault, we got Something Crawled Out issue 3. Dynamite, we got Vampirella issue 673. From Image and Skybound, we have Saga 71, Spawn 360, The Walking Dead Deluxe issue 104, Knights vs. Samurai issue 4, Savage Dragon issue 274, Radiant Black volume 6, Invincible Volume 7, which is a new edition of that's coming out. And then we have Boom. Joe, take it away there, please.
So boom, we have a fair again a fairly light week. This has sort of been apropos of Boom this year. 3 or 4 titles. We've got Something Is Killing the Children's script book. For issue 1, we have Fence Challengers, Sweet 16, issue 1. And then we have a number 1, and we all know the rule, Boom, number 1. You read it, and that is When I Lay My Vengeance Upon Thee, issue 1. This is the most Nick Friar book I have read. And I'd call dibs on it, but I'm already reading The Exorcism at Penn at 1600 Penn, and I can only handle so many horror exorcism books if I still want to be able to sleep at night and maintain my sanity. This can you look up the writer and the author, the writer
Yeah.
and the artist? I meant to jot that down because I want to give them props here. This was such an excellent first issue. The art was very gothic. uh Gives you horror vibes. It sort of gives you, or at least it gave me, sort of that like medieval Spanish sort of era vibe to it. And so you're dealing with priests, you're dealing with demons, you're dealing with exorcisms. And the way this first issue starts off, where there's a lot of silent panels, meaning right there's no
Ooh.
dialogue. You've got like 3 or 4 panels where you just see a priest performing a baptism, and just like makes you go, holy shit. So written by Gus Moreno with art by Jacob Rebelka. Jacob's art is just so fantastic. It is so fitting for this story because you right away you get the horror vibes. It's gothic. It's a little sketchy, right? There's not a lot of clean lines, which I love. It gives the characters definition, right? It gives them this sort of like you would expect a priest who does exorcisms, right, as their main job shouldn't have smooth skin, right? They shouldn't look upbeat and fresh. They should look weathered and haggard like
Yeah.
an old catcher's mitt, right? And that's what Jacob's art style really sort of brings out and reflects. So it really adds depth to the character. And Gus Moreno, man, like I've never read anything by him, and this was absolutely fantastic. So I'm not calling dibs because I want you to read it, because I do want to discuss the exorcism at 1600 pen, and I don't want to just like lay claim to all the exorcism books on here, but like I highly recommend this book to anyone. It's a quintessential Boom issue 1. Like it's
Mhm.
just you read it, you're sucked in, and you want the entire story now.
Yeah, I remember this got announced, and I'm kicking myself for not having read it for this week. But now I have something to read when I have the day off on New Year's Day. But yeah, it's definitely something. I appreciate you not calling dibs, so I have a little bit of time to look at it, and then we can talk about it together as it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Awesome, good stuff. That is it for what's new this week. Now we're not into the floppies just yet. We're going to get there in a little bit. First, we got to do a little bit of reflection for the people, for those who are new, maybe just hopping in because it's award season, want to see who's just winning random ass awards in comics as much as we are the ones that kick everything off. Initially, Joe, we like to start things off as we get into the floppies with the top books, the top 5 books specifically from the year that we recommended ourselves on the show. And for those who are new to the show, we the show started off primarily as just recommending arcs of stories, trades, and what have you, graphic novels, OGNs. But over time, the show has evolved where we're constantly staying on top of all the new releases each week. We are, interviewing creators from across the industry. Make sure you check out our audio channels if you haven't already. But that's how the show has evolved. So we still recommend books throughout the year. We do our solicits as well, but we don't get to do as many as we would have liked. We actually did 16 total, 16 review episodes total. So that's 32 recommendations between the two of us. So it gives you, a book a week. Maybe 20 weeks short, but you're getting plenty to work with throughout the
A
course
book a
of the
week
year.
for 2/3 of the year.
Yeah, well, if it's not if it's more than one arc, then that's called you're welcome. But anyways, to quote Brian Wilson, the former closer, not the singer. Anyways, so we Joe, the top 5 books that you recommended on this program throughout 2024. What do you got?
Oh man, I had a hard time whittling this down to 5. And so I didn't just pick what I think were the best books. Some of these were like books that I think hit me a little bit. Now I will say one of the books that I think is one of the best books of the year period that came out and that I discussed was The One Hand and The Six Fingers.
Mm-hmm.
That is hands down, I think, one of the best books in 2024 period. And you may see this title come up again in the floppies. AWA had a fairly light year by their standards. They did more with Kickstarter this year and put out some stuff that way. But one of the series that did come out that absolutely floored me was The Madness. Now, some of these books have a bit of a theme to them. They really kind of hit me emotionally, and that's why they're on this list. And The Madness did that. Oh, hold on, we got a guest, folks. It wouldn't be the
Oh my
floppies without a
goodness.
guest.
Oh
Hey,
wow.
kiddo.
Oh, wow. Okay. Doesn't want the mic on either. She doesn't like sharing podcast hosts because for those who maybe follow Doc on socials, they know that Doc was doing the the Gilmore holiday movie series, and young Violet was making her podcasting. I guess her podcasting debut came on TLDR, but finally got her own co-hosting gig. Now she doesn't want to share dad. So
that's cool. Right. We did our Christmas videos, and now she's got a taste for it. But the madness really did hit me emotionally. I mean, that was a revenge tour to end all revenge tours, right? There was some John Wick vibes, some horror vibes. I loved everything about the madness from AWA Studios. And again, that's another one I cannot recommend enough. Criminal, which is not a book that came out this year, but is a book that I discussed this year. That is, of course, from the team of Brubaker and Phillips. There's no better crime writers, period, right? Especially when it comes to comics than those two. And I absolutely loved Criminal. I can't wait for the show to come out. That's going to be excellent. But this book, again, is a must read for anyone who's either a Brubaker Phillips fan or you're just a sort of a crime noir fan. Crocodile Black. This is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson. This was another sort of horror book. This one dealt a lot with mental illness. It was very dark. It was very violent. But this was a very visceral book, and definitely just took you on an absolute roller coaster for a ride. And then I think one of the books that maybe hit me the most was A Haunted Girl, and this was written by not
Ethan
Zach
Sachs.
Kaplan, but say it again.
Ethan Sachs.
Ethan Sachs. Thank you. I wanted to say Zach Kaplan, right? Because he did write a ton of. I think because they kind of look similar, and we interviewed them right around the same time. I just sort of I get their names and their faces mixed up, but no, Ethan Sachs, because he wrote this book with a lot of help with his daughter, who is dealing with a lot of things herself, so she was able to give great perspective. And this was just I love books that hit me like a sack of bricks emotionally, right? It's going to be your Sean Lewis's, it's going to be your Jeff Lemire's, and this book definitely did that. And it was a very cathartic book, and it was a very powerful book. So those were the 5 that I really enjoyed discussing this past year.
Yeah, those are all great picks. For me, so the one that I recommended that was probably that I've probably thought about the most. I mean, I got all the single issues because I loved there's so many cool covers, and I had to get it in trade form as well. Was Ain't No Grave. Of course, this is Scotty Young.
Ain't No Grave.
And Jorge Corona. And I sniped this one from Joe because he's talked about them on the show previously with Middle West. And again, didn't do oh my god, what's the one with the woman who's the artist? I'm blanking on what that one is. Yeah, I'm asking you.
Me, You're Afraid in the Dark.
Yeah, look at you. This is why we work. The whiskey,
gets things moving.
Yes, the Me You Love in the Dark is that's that. I loved that series as well. I know you didn't do that one on the show, but you talked about that one as it was.
I meant to, and it just got away from me. Shit happens.
On the similar note of Scotty Young, I Hate Fairyland. Oh my god, I think it's I'm blanking on the artist name that is with Scotty's last name is Bean. But anyways, Scotty obviously I talked about his original run, but now they have a second volume of I Hate Fairyland that has been outstanding and a great follow up to the original series. Somna, which is Becky Cloonan and Tula Lotay, that was over at Distillery, and that was quite the steamy series. And I think, Joe, I gave you. I know I had.
You gave me issues 2 and 3. I don't have issue 1.
Wait a minute.
I
don't own issue 3. I'm sorry. I do, but I own it in digital form, which I got.
Okay. So maybe I read it. So maybe it was I'm missing an issue here.
No, you got one, but it's in each issue. It's 2 chapters. They're oversized issues, not just in the Distillery way. There's also multiple chapters in it. Nottingham, which wrapped up this year. I didn't realize it at the time that we were going to get the final arc of Nottingham, but man, what a fun friggin' series. And that was, I know that was a big one for Mad Cave when it first came out. And it's just, I absolutely love it. That is something that and Ain't No Grave are 2 titles that I'm I will go back and read those someday. I really enjoyed those so much. For me to go back and reread a series, I'll go back and flip through it and appreciate the art and stuff like that. Maybe I just, when I'm in my 50s, I'll think about that and be more likely to go back and read some shit that I loved. But right now, I just want to read more new stuff. But to clock those and be like, yeah, I'm gonna go back and check that shit out 100%. Like that says a lot to me. So that's 4. I did write down 6 like a dumbass, so I won't read my 6th one. But I
Read
recommended
it. No, just write it down. Just tell the people what it is.
the last one I wrote down was Dark X-Men, and that would be the 6th one that gets on the chopping block. In fairness, but I did love that. Loved how Steve Fox wrote Gambit, Madeline Pryor. Everybody loved how she was
straddling Madeline Pryor, baby.
Everybody loved her in X-Men 97. You'll love her in that series as well. I wish we got more of that. Then The Devil That Wears My Face, which fell in an awkward spot for the floppies because the first 3 issues came out in 2023, and then we got the end of the series in 2024. So that was actually eligible for the 2023 floppies, and it didn't end up winning anything. It was a runner-up. This year I would have had it as a runner-up as well. So, but it was like that speaks to how good this is. And I really think this is an all-time horror series. And again, another one that I'm like, I will go back and read this someday. And this is also one of the bunch. I think of the bunch, this is the one that's like, this needs to get turned into a movie 100%. Like there's like, I think Ain't No Grave is like really good for comics. I don't know about being adapted to anything else. I Hate Fairyland should be an animated series. Nottingham could be something, but like The Devil That Wears My Face, like that shit should be a movie. I'd love to see that at some point down the line. Now, for the top 5 TLDR books of 2024 that are co-host suggested.
So before that, Nick, another thing too, if you ever decide to have kids, and I'm looking forward to this when Violet's older, is sharing a lot of these books, rereading them with her, giving them to her, right? So it gives you another excuse to read them later on. But yes, 2024 books that are co-host suggested. So I didn't get to read many of the books that you recommended because we didn't do many trades, right? Right. And so, you know, it was tough. So like, well, Nick, I read 835 books. Maybe I would have gotten to 1,000 had I read more of yours.
Honestly, that if you did 5, that would have been what, like 5 times, like let's just call them all 5 to keep it round. What's that?
25.
Yeah, 25. Yeah, there you go, 25. Yeah. That would have got you closer to 900, but not over the hump. Okay.
So I've got a bunch of books here that I am looking forward to reading, and that I plan on reading in 2025. I Hate Fairyland. That's a book like I definitely like need to read, and I think I was like that book was told to me when I first started reading Middle West. I remember the guy at Hub Comics saying, "If you like that, you should go check out I Hate Fairyland. It's different, but I think you'll like it." Nottingham. Right, like that book just got so far in my wheelhouse, it's not even funny.
I honestly thought for some reason that you had read it just because like of how much like I talked about it. I don't know why, but anyways.
Ain't No Grave, right? Young and Corona, right? Somna, which you mentioned, I plan on I almost did make an attempt to read that, and I was like, I'm missing an issue, so I don't want to start it and then either not be able to start it or not finish it because I couldn't remember what issue I was missing. And then Spy Superb.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's just sounds like another book that's up my alley that I want to check out.
By the way, it was Brett Bean, who I was trying to think of before. That is the artist now on I Hate Fairyland. For me, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, obviously an outstanding book. May come up later in the Floppies conversation. Outstanding book that Joe recommended. And that was one, look, social media is an absolute dumpster fire, although I am starting to I like Blue Sky, Joe. I'm not afraid to say it.
Like, I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying it.
It has been pleasant. But I will say you got Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees before Blue Sky before we had embraced Blue Sky. So at least Twitter did something for the show this year. Dark Spaces Dungeon. My God, I inhaled this thing. Like I read shit so fast, dude. It was so friggin' good. Yeah.
Right.
Great call.
Oh man, so good. So
Scott
good.
Snyder, Hayden Sherman. This thing is outstanding. If you're into serial killers, like anybody who likes reading or more likely that you like listening to podcasts about that or watching documentaries on that, like this is some great like serial killer fiction. 7 Years in Darkness. This is one legitimately that like I was so like, oh, I'm gonna just read this and surprise Joe, but I don't want to call dibs yet because I just hadn't read it yet. Blah blah blah. Then Joe out of nowhere like sees the second volume and calls dibs. I was like,
I picked it up on a whim and fell in love immediately.
Yep, 100%. That's on me. That was 1,000% on me, and it's outstanding series.
So I can't wait to hear your thoughts on your next 2 books.
These are the 2 that I have not read.
Oh, get on it, Nicholas.
Yes, the One Hand and the Six Fingers. I've not like The only one that I was more excited to read was Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees.
Yeah.
But it's on the same level. And then Crocodile Black, which you've
Yeah.
praised a ton. Like, but again, like this is where it's like I've busted your chops before, but we read a lot of stuff. And as much as in an ideal world, like if we were back to doing what we just did originally, where it's just doing trades weekend, we do 52 of those in a year, which holy shit, if we had to do 52, that'd be crazy. In a year, if we like, it would be a lot easier to go back and do this. But you and I are staying on top of all the weekly releases, and then we're also doing a lot of interviews, which are inherently, recommendations in some capacity as well. So we're doing a lot of reading on those as well. So, that's one thing I'm trying to do for 2025, Joe, is I'm also mainly trying to do this with pros, but I want to do it with comics as well. It's just like what we are reading that we do for the show is reading for pleasure, obviously, but at the same time, like there's stuff like I'm making sure I'm prioritizing all this stuff with comics, like for the show and everything, and I'm on top of that. I don't want to not stay on top of that, but it's like I want to make sure, like, hey, there's this series that I've been meaning to friggin' binge. It's like I don't know if I'm going to do it on the show, but I want to binge the shit out of it. Or if like, I do. There are certain books that you talk about where I have FOMO, like Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, where I'm like, I want to read this, but you talk about other ones that I really like, didn't have FOMO for. It's like, well, I got to go and I got to make sure I prioritize that more. Just like I always try and make fun things work, but I need to just make fun things fun sometimes. And I struggle with that a lot. So,
well,
yeah, it's one of my flaws.
We all can't be fun guys, right?
Exactly. I've never been described as funny or fun. But anyways, moving on. We have the books in series. Before we get into the floppies, the books in series that we're most excited for in 2025. And 2024 was an outstanding year. It's going to be there was a lot of tough decisions. Actually, I would say probably every decision that we made pretty much for the floppies was a tough one. There's only a couple unanimous choices. But in 2025, we're already seeing a lot of promise for what's to come in this year. What are you most excited about?
Well, I just want to highlight some of the books I was excited for in 2024, right? So You and I from AWA Studios, that was excellent. Morning Star by Tim Daniel and DB Andre. That was excellent. We had the two of those guys on, right? We had Tim and DB on. May have them on again, right? But that was an excellent series. Pine and Merrimack from Kyle Starks, right? Absolute. We had him on to discuss that book. Absolute excellent. Fran Galen's art. We cannot stop talking about his art in that, which is tremendous.
Yeah.
Beyond Real by Zach Kaplan. You're gonna hear about Zach from me more later, but Beyond Real was just a trippy meta kick-ass book. Constantine, right? Hellblazer Dead in America. Bear Pirate Viking Queen from Sean Lewis that dropped in April. And then Joker Year One from Chip Zdarsky, right? So these were all books that at this time last year were like, oh, I'm so pumped for. Now, sometimes we look at these books and then we kind of forget about them because they don't come out until later in the year, right? And so like literally all these books hit, right? Sometimes you look for a book and maybe it's a letdown, maybe it doesn't live up to the hype or whatever. But literally all these books that I was looking forward to absolutely slapped. And I'm hoping for more of the same in 2025. We have The Last Boy from Dan Panosian and Alessio Avallone. This, I believe, is this a Boom book? Yes, right. So we love Dan. He's awesome. And so I'm very much looking forward to this. And I'm hoping we can get Dan on to discuss this book in the near future. Speaking of DB Andre and Tim Daniel and Mad Cave, we have Crushed Depth, which was just announced, which is another book we can't wait to read, and we can't wait to have them on to discuss that book. Witcher, Bear and the Butterfly from Dark Horse. This is written not by Bartosz Stibber, but written by Cy Spurrier with art by Stephen Green. So like, oh God, like we read Damn Them All, and that was very Constantine-esque. I can't wait to see him go balls deep into Constantine and write a series. It's going to be absolutely excellent. Red Hulk, written by Benjamin Percy. Those Not Afraid from Dark Horse, Kyle Starks and Patrick Piazzalunga. And then just in general, the next phase of the Massiverse, which they're deeming as a rebuild era, coming off the Catalyst War and all those titles. So I am very much excited for all those. And I can almost say without a shadow of a doubt, we've read Crushed Depth. Wait.
Yes. No, you're
Yes,
fine.
we
Yeah,
have.
we read the first issue of Crush Death. So
Yeah.
so Joe and I have a ton of overlap when it comes to this. I mean, there's not much difference, quite honestly. The only other things I would notice is more of One for Sorrow from Jamie McKelvey over at Distillery. We only got the first issue of that, and oh my god, the end of that first issue was outstanding. And I'm excited for a lot of the other ongoing stuff that's going to be continuing into the year. But I'm also really excited for the next chapter of Something Is Killing Children. We were at C2E2, and James Tynan said, like,
Yes.
2024 was about bringing in new readers, and we got interesting stories and like these one-offs and everything, and it was fun and definitely great jump. Every issue was like a jump on point for new readers, but I cannot wait for this next chapter of Something Is Killing the Children, because the issue 0 kind of set the stage for that, and holy shit, it is very promising. But yeah, crushed it. Yeah.
See that? Rock hard. Rock hard for it.
But yes, we did get to read Crush Depth from DB Andre and Tim Daniel, the first issue of that, and whew, I want to. I'm hoping that we find time to chat with them ahead of the FOC. Definitely at some point we'll chat with them about Crush Depth. But one thing that really stood out to me in that first issue was like I feel like reading I feel like in comics it's not as easy to like the fear that I have of like the deep underwater, I feel like it's hard to like get across in comics. And I feel like I've seen that on occasion, but not a ton. And I'm not saying I've seen a ton of attempts necessarily either to really try and capture that, but that was done in this first issue. And that really like scratched an itch for me, because like the deep water, man, like
Well,
I find it
so
fascinating, but I'm all fucking set. Thank you.
I'll tell you, right? Like Zach Kaplan nailed this. It's a feeling of claustrophobic, right? Of being of being claustrophobic, and especially in the deep sea, right? Because that is like the least explored, area, on
You're
this
talking about the
planet.
sub about the claustrophobia.
Yeah, right. And
Yes.
just there's a very claustrophobic feeling when reading it, and there was something that I picked out when reading that, and I
Yeah.
messaged DB about. He said, I didn't even pick up on that. It was just a beautiful piece of background art that I just, as a wrestling fan, I caught. And I know DB's a wrestling fan, and it was kind of funny that I pointed that out. And he said, "What are you talking about?" I go, "It's from your book." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh."
When you said that, I was like, that's got to be from the book, right? I didn't see it, but I'm like, what is Joe wouldn't just randomly like, unless you accidentally send it to somebody else, like no way.
Right.
But for me, like, so the claustrophobic feeling is definitely there. But for me, it was actually more about like the parts where we're like out in the ocean, and there's like
Oh,
you see
yeah,
some things, but you don't know a lot of what's going on. Like there's like, and if you see like a glow of something, it's like, what the fuck is that shit? Like you're
yeah,
deep down, like you're dealing with like, is the angler fish with the weird fucking teeth and the
yeah.
flashlight thing from Finding Nemo? Like that shit scares the piss out of me. But I
There's a
also find it fascinating.
Yeah, there's a coldness too that
Yes.
just comes with it, right? So
Yes.
just it was an excellent. I told him, I said before you reading it, I said this book's gonna kick ass. You got nothing to worry about. He's like, I hope. I go, don't hope. You know this book kicks ass.
Yeah.
Don't be coy. You know it kicks ass.
So if you're listening to the floppies, ahead of time, and we have ahead of our interview and whatnot, then just make sure you let your local comic shop know, hey, add Crush Depth to my pull list, because we don't know when the FOC date is, but if you get ahead of it now, you'll definitely be getting
Mm-hmm.
that first issue, and you're gonna want to read more. But I loved it. Awesome, yeah. So a lot to be excited about in 2025. But that we can wait for 2025 another time. We got to get finally to the floppies, to the awards, Joe. And a quick refresher for those who are new, we do have some new awards, but the awards that we're going to be going through, we have the Saga Floppy for Best Ongoing Series of 2024, the Once and Future Award for Best New Series of 2024, the Hawkeye Floppy for Most Underrated / Surprising Book of 2024. So it could be a couple different things there. Best Limited Series of 2024 is a new addition to the roster, as is Breakout Creator of 2024. Then we have the Jim Lee floppy for Best Cover Artist of 2024, the Jack Kirby floppy for Best Interior Artist from 2024, Stan Lee floppy for Best Writer of 2024, and then the MVP for Most Valuable Publisher of 2024. Let's start back at the top, Joe. We'll go through our series awards. Who is the floppy winner or runner-up, wherever you want to start, for the Saga Floppy for Best Ongoing Series of 2024?
This was so friggin' hard, Nicholas. 2024 was an absolutely outstanding year for comics. Out of the 835 books that I read, I might say that 800 of them were fucking awesome. right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was very hard to whittle this down. Last year's winner was Detective Comics, and that was primarily written by Ram V. And that was, I didn't see that coming, and that one absolutely blew me away. This year, like, to tell you how good this year was for ongoing series, my runner ups were Ultimate Spider-Man, which was like a stone's throw away from being the winner.
Mm-hmm.
There was Local Man, there was Nightwing, Thundercats, Derek Kirk Kim's The Last Mermaid, but ultimately my 2024 saga floppy is going to Transformers.
Nice pick.
Daniel Warren Johnson has just absolutely killed it. The whole Energon universe in general has been excellent. And between, Transformers and Duke and Cobra Commander and Scarlet and Destro and now the newest GI Joe installment, it's just been so freaking good. I'm gonna pick a month where it's gonna be just an Energon month for me, and each week, barring we don't have any interviews or things like that, I will discuss a different book from the Energon universe because it's just been an absolute game changer. And this is very nostalgic for me. And the funny thing is I was never a huge. I mean, I love Transformers and I love GI Joes, but like I was more of a Thundercats guy. I was more of a Ninja Turtles guy. I was more of an X-Men guy, right? When it came to the cartoons, the comics, the toys. But this has brought me so far back to my youth. I've been collecting Transformers toys. I've got the Optimus Prime Transformer Lego. So like this has just been like for all those things, like so nostalgic, so perfect for me. It was little doubt in my mind that it had to go to Transformers.
This is a great pick. It's not going to be on my list, but it definitely like like all the books that you're talking about, like all your runner ups, they definitely deserve to be in the conversation. Obviously, you have dibs on Ultimate Spider-Man, so I absolutely can't weigh in on that, and on The Last Mermaid. But man, like the Ultimate Spider-Man, obviously people are giving a lot of praise to. So it makes sense that like that was essentially your top runner up. For me, you're right. Like I think if you just look at our groupings, it's like this is how good of a year was. Like we have quite a few titles that could have easily won this. I mean, Uncanny X-Men came in and has been outstanding and has absolutely scratched every itch for me when it comes to X-Men. Obviously, it helps when you have like pretty much my four favorite characters that are X-Men characters. Not counting Magneto. But geez, like it's been. That's been outstanding. Feral has been so damn good.
Right?
Another outstanding series. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We've raved about a ton.
Oh,
That is probably right there with Kill All Immortals for making the short list. And those two being probably like, 2A and 2B on my list. But ultimately, number one for me, Joe, has got to go to Image Comics. Casper Wingard, Kieran Gillen, the power fantasy. I mean,
yeah.
the whole moral versus ethical conversation. I have been obsessed with this. We have a terrifying combination of calmness and explosiveness throughout this series so far. Brilliant artwork. The colors are so friggin' bright, and it plays really interestingly with the serious nature of this story. This book. I think about so much. Like there, like all these books I'm talking about today. Like I think about a lot, but like this is one that like I have other titles winning awards, but this one's always very front of mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm running into the same issue with the power fantasy that I think you ran into with Die. I got to be in the right headspace,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and for me,
That's
I
fair.
kind of need to have a couple of issues to string back to back to read.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fair.
Reading this once a month for me, like to me, this works better if I can like Saga. I need to catch up on Saga because like to me, Saga works better when I can rip through an arc in one
Mm-hmm.
sitting.
Yeah.
But the Power Fantasy is absolutely worthy of this award. But like I'm having the same things reading this that you did with Die. You got to be in the right headspace. You got to have a couple of them to read back to back, But I love Casper Wingard's art. He is just one of the most beautiful artists going, right? And it's
Yeah.
his colors are vibrant. The storytelling through his art is tremendous. And Kieran Gillen, we had him on to discuss this,
Yeah.
as you said. And again, like I love hearing about Kieran's process when writing his stories. It's just so it's so interesting.
He's a very good interview. I enjoy every interview that we have for different reasons. He is like a fascinating individual. I feel like I learn a lot from hearing him talk. Unlike like whereas like when you have I don't know like Chip on, we just have fun, and I feel like I might get a little bit dumber. Whereas like and then with Stegman also very insightful. But anyways, not to pick sides or anything in that fight. But you mentioned your 2023 winner, Joe. I also want to note mine. My 2023 winner. Getting my years mixed up now, was Philadelphia. Outstanding year. Obviously, he's been on a little bit of a hiatus this year. Very excited for, not sure when. We haven't touched base with Rodney for a little bit, but I'm very excited for that to get back and going again. But that is enough for our best ongoing series, the 2024 Saga Award. We'll do a little recap at the end of it all for those trying to keep track at home. Why don't we move next to Joe to your 2024 Once and Future Award for Best New Series.
So there's a caveat with this award. So this had to begin no later than October 2024, right? And so my 2023 winner was The Madness, right? I talked about it as one of my top books I discussed, this year. That book was absolutely tremendous. My runners up again were the Energon universe books, Thundercats, that universe, because now there's more titles, like the Chitara title in that series has been fantastic. The Last Wardens by Amit Tischler and Elliot Spurl, and which has been great, and I can't wait for that one for the next issue of that. But ultimately, like, this has been my winner for such a long time, and just got solidified with each issue I read following the first one. And that's Zach Kaplan's Kill All Immortals. This book has everything. It's got action. It's got violence. It is such a dysfunctional family story. It's got, Viking lore. It's Fico Ossio's art. Again, it's some of the most beautiful, vibrant art that I have seen this year. And seen in a while. Like, you've always been a big Fico Ossio fan. You sort of, turned me on onto his art style, and I think it's just like this is just some of the best art we got, this year. It was just so good because it's very vibrant for a very dark, dysfunctional, violent story. And with each issue, the layers just keep building. Freya, I am so invested in her. She is like, I've talked about badass female characters, and when we had Zach on, I said I put Freya at the same level as an Erica Slaughter, right? Like, I want them to succeed at all costs. I want to see them win. I'm so invested, and I love everything about this book. And I believe we're getting more of it, right? I believe we're getting a second arc to it. So like, this is a must read book. If you haven't read it, go get caught up. You don't know what you're missing. Everything about it is sheer perfection.
It's an outstanding series. I absolutely love it, and it does come up for me in this conversation. I do want to note my 2023 winner for this was No One. I loved No One, and again, that one, No One had an extra advantage because of all the work that why am I Kyle Higgins? I almost said Kyle Starks. I'm like, it's not Kyle Starks. Kyle Higgins, all the work that he was putting into that series, man, beyond what was going on the page. That podcast series, we raved about it a ton. For me, I only listed 2 runner-ups here. I have Feral, which is like very deserving, been a really fun series. Really enjoyed talking with Trish and Tony about it so much as well. Got to see Tony over at Double Midnight Comics in Manchester, Manchester, New Hampshire, when he was doing his little Feral tour, which was a lot of fun. Tone was with him as well. But then at number 2 for me was Kill All Immortals. This was probably the toughest one for me. Limited series was really difficult too, but this was really, really hard because I loved Kill All Immortals as well. This was a series that I actually called dibs on previously, and then we ended up having Zach on the show. I like, from the covers, it was so much friggin' fun. But I had to give the nod to Rook Exodus from Image Comics. This is by Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok, and the character design was so much my style. And again, when I talk about like the books that I think about the most, like I bought like the two t-shirts
Yeah.
from Ghost Machine, like people, because like I want action figures of these guys. Like everything about this series, just like it's adult, but it also scratches like an itch of, I don't want to say nostalgia, but there's like a level of familiarity for me. Like even though these are all brand new characters, like it's post-apocalyptic world where like we have these warden characters who have an ability to communicate with animals of a certain species, depends on what type of mask you have, and all of them like look more, one looks more badass than the next, and it's just a non-stop like rock and roll friggin' thrill ride. And I haven't talked about it in the show yet. I that'll be the next book that I do on the show. It's so much damn fun, and like I think similar to like you have like, you know, one hand six fingers is a big one for you, like sixth finger, excuse me. I you haven't read this one either. I think you'll understand my viewpoint on this, and why I had to pick this as my once and future award for best new series of 2024. But a difficult category, and it's not going to get any easier as we move into best limited series of
Yeah.
2024.
Christ, this was another series I struggled with. And I mean, I pretty much knew who the winner was going to be, but like the runners up were really, really close. They're really, really strong contenders, right? Crocodile Black, Pine and Merrimack, Bear Pirate Viking Queen, the Infernals, right?
Yeah.
Morning Star, I talked about that earlier. Tim Daniel and DB Andre. Avengers Twilight was strong consideration for this award. That was again Chip Zdarsky, just a great kick-ass, you know, older Avengers story that just had so many great layers to it. But the winner was, and I mean, as soon as I read it, I go, this is going to be the winner. Is The One Hand and the Six Fingers, written by Ram V and also Dan Waters. This was two separate titles, but it was telling the same story from the vantage point of the protagonist and the antagonist, and they wove together so beautifully, so perfectly. This is a sort of a neo-noir futuristic, you know, detective serial killer cat and mouse story, right? So all the things that I love. And it was dark, it was gritty, it was raw, and the ending just absolutely knocked my socks off. The trade for this is out, and I haven't taken a look at it yet because I haven't seen it at my local comic book shop. They didn't have it for some reason, but I'm pretty sure it's structured that like issue one of The One Hand is followed by issue one of the Six Fingers, and because that's how I would do it, right?
Yeah.
And that way you're getting the full story. So The One Hand and the Six Fingers, just such a, again, this to me was just one of the absolute best books from 2024, and this one should be read by anyone and everyone.
Yeah, I mean that's a great pick. That's obviously one that you had dibs on. I'm going to be reading the trade of that, and that doesn't end up making my list, but I'm sure if I read it, it absolutely would. But when I look at like, I have so many on my list that it's like it would have made it, but I don't know where it would have necessarily been because I love so much of this. Like the Displaced is a book that had this come out later.
Completely forgot about the Displaced. Ed Brisson, like,
yep.
Jesus,
had that come out later in the year, I mean, maybe that would have like the momentum into the into award season. Maybe that would have helped it out a little bit. But like at the same time, like I definitely consider that in the course. But that's another one that was like we raved about that throughout its entire run over at Boom. Awesome series. You talked about Bear Pirate Viking Queen. Kill Your Darlings actually qualified for best limited series. That's another one. That's outstanding. The Helverine miniseries. The Helverine miniseries was another one. Morningstar, which you mentioned. Pine and Merrimack, which could come back. I would love for it to come back, but it's also still written where it's like it's fine on its own. The Infernals, similar situation to Pine and Merrimack, but another great one. Beneath the Trees, Where Nobody Sees, which was written as a limited series, but we're going to get more of it, so that's a whole other thing. When the Blood Has Dried, which again falls under a similar category, could get more, but like we got it, and it's its own story. For me, my number one runner-up
this was obvious.
Was Ain't No Grave, and it was a really hard. It was for my runner-up was really hard for me to not put this at my top one. But for the top one, I raved about this book week in and week out, and it was so fucking well done by Cy Spurrier and Aaron Campbell. And of course, that is Constantine, Dead in America. Brilliant series. I love the commentary. We get nonstop commentary from the series throughout. I love the way that Constantine moves and how others work around him. It very much felt like what I've said a ton on this show. Like in a good Constantine story, anybody that's in the room with him is not safe at any given moment, and that is how I felt throughout the entirety of this series. I felt like I love the series on the whole. Issue 9 was a perfect Constantine issue, and Cy and Aaron now have 2 of those because I can't remember the issue from their initial run, but it's the one with like the fish market and the mermaid. That's another one. Like that randomly pops up in my head like at times. Like I don't like I think about whenever I think about Constantine, that pops up, I guess is what it comes down to. But this issue 9 in Dead in America was similar. So this was a maxi series. I think it was ended up being 11 issues, so not a full-fledged maxi series, whatever. But for me, like this has to be like the best limited series of 2024, just because this is such an important character to me, and a return for these guys after they killed it before, so damn good.
I knew this was going to be your award winner before the first issue even came out. Right. It's like if it wasn't, I was going to slap you because I know how much you love the character. I know how much you love Cy Spurrier and Aaron Campbell, creating the, or writing and drawing the character. So like, that is like so fitting. And I'm so glad that you're winning. And I had an absolute blast talking with Cy. Talking with Aaron Campbell about this book. We did talk to Cy about it as well, but mostly your most recent one was with Aaron, and just that was such a great chat. Aaron was a good dude. A lot of whiskey talk too, which was great.
Yes, I highly recommend, if you haven't already, go subscribe to one of our audio channels. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review, and then go listen to our chat with Cy. And then after that, listen to our chat with Aaron. Make sure if you haven't read the series, you kind of mix in, that in between the interviews, because we did one before the series started and one as the series was ending. So had a lot of fun talking with those guys. Very, very grateful to be able to talk about, the creators working on the character that I love so much as they're doing it. So really fun stuff there. So that is best limited series of 2024. Definitely the most jammed of the series awards. And this was, again, one of our new additions. So we don't have a snazzy name for that. I'm sure we'll work on that for 2025. Maybe not. I don't know.
If you have any suggestions, send them our way.
Yeah, by all means. And then to round out our list of series awards, where we get into the creator awards, we want to talk 2024 Hawkeye Award for most underrated / surprising book. So this can fall under 2 different categories. It could be very underrated. People weren't talking about it as much. It almost slipped past one of us. Or most surprising, maybe a book that everybody was talking about, but we liked it way more than we anticipated when we started reading the series. So what do you got for me, Joe?
So for me in 2023, it was Local Man. I had no idea what to expect. This was just, I was more familiar with Tim Seeley's work than I was Tony Fleece's work. But I had read,
you read Stray Dogs, obviously.
Stray Dogs, right? And so, okay. So, and then like, this series just blew me away, right? So that was, an obvious 2023 winner for me. But this year, again, a very similar thing happened. So my runners up were, again, 2 books that were not on my radar at all. And that's Gary Maloney's When the Blood Has Dried. That book really ignited the fantasy itch in me. Like I've always been a fantasy fan, right? But like I've been on such a fantasy run since I've read that book. It really took me back to like being a kid and reading a lot of those Del Rey paperback fantasy stories. And then another book that like just based on the title alone, like I never would have picked in a million years, but it was it's by Image, and the format was very squarish. It wasn't oversized like a distillery book or a Black Label book,
or manga-esque.
It was just unique.
No, I'm saying, was it more manga-esque?
I couldn't speak to that because I've never read like a manga floppy before. I've only read them in like collected,
Well, yeah,
like.
that's how they only come in like the book forms. That's
Oh
why.
yeah, no. This is more like just like an app, like an oversized square. Like it was just
Got it.
very, very odd shit. But that's The Last Mermaid by Derek Kirk Kim. He wrote and drew this book, and I talked about how beautiful Fico Ossio's art has been, and Casper Wingard's. This was the most beautifully drawn book of 2024, and the story again is very heartfelt. It's very emotional, but there's some great action to it. You're very much invested in the characters, especially the cute little axolotl named Lottie. But it's sort of a dystopian future, type of book, and so it like that absolutely blew me away. And I absolutely loved it. And I again, those are two books that I had no idea weren't on my radar at all, that absolutely blew me away. But for me, the book that did it, we've mentioned it a few times on the program already, and my 2024 Hawkeye floppy goes to Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, written by Patrick Horvath. And again, this was a book that I kind of was a little dismissive of because I didn't know exactly what it was about. You're dealing with sort of like these Berenstain Bear type characters, but what it was that caught me, there was some good buzz about it on Twitter, as you mentioned earlier, but also the cover. Like I didn't pay close enough attention to the cover, but you've got this Berenstain Bear type character dragging a sack with blood, following it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I read Stray Dogs at that point. So, hey, don't give the cutesy animal books a try, Joseph, right? And was absolutely blown away, right? I saw someone describe this book as Berenstain Bears meets Dexter, and it is the most spot on elevator pitch, I have ever come across when it comes to a comic. And each issue just blew me away. Patrick Horvath, again, another writer artist doing his own thing, right? And this book absolutely blew me away. We met him at C2E2. He signed a book for me. Like
What a nice guy.
I know, right? He was very nice, and he's someone we should reach out to. Maybe when the series comes back, we should reach out to and have on the show. This book was it was a smash hit. Absolutely deserving of the not just the Hawkeye most underrated book, but at the time possibly best limited series. But we know it's coming back. But I could also consider it for, best new series as well as the Saga Award as well. It was just that. It was that damn good, Nicholas.
By the way, speaking of C2E2, a lot of really nice people there, and you mentioned
Yeah.
The Last Mermaid, Derek Kirk Kim.
Oh, he was wonderful.
We met a lot of great people at C2E2, but you talk about like nicest people at C2E2.
Oh, the best.
It might have to go to Derek, and
we
had
got to
lot
have
of great
him
conversations.
Too.
Yeah, we got to talk about the book on the show.
I was going to talk about when the trade came out, but that was around Halloween's spooky season.
Oh yeah, it's tough.
We had a game plan, so I'm thinking about doing it when the second arc comes out.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that might be a good time to have him on as well. So, like Derek, if you're listening, I haven't forgotten about you. And we're gonna reach out. We want to have you on the show. Timing was just a little, between the release of the trade and all that, but loved The Last Mermaid.
Yeah,
but
now
Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, like there was just chef's kiss.
Like when you talk about like the Constantine Dead in America being like expected winner for me, like on your behalf, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. Honestly, all your awards, I think Transformers for me of your series awards is probably the most surprising. As much as you have raved about it, and as much as it is very deserving, I just feel like you and I have like talked about Kill All Immortals a ton and just how damn good that series is. Like it could have easily been both of us picking that as the winner of the series. One Hand, Six Fingers, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. Like you've raved about those two books probably more than any other series throughout the year. Like 100%. Like if we were doing odds, like it would have been like minus 1,000 on each of them that they're going to win awards in the floppies this year. But I think the one I'm going to mention right here may end up being the most surprising of the bunch.
Yes, 100%.
Yes. I have not talked about this on the show yet. I'm very excited to. It will come after Rook X's. Because I like Rook.
This is where I thought you would have had Rook Exodus, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't think it's tough to call, a Jeff Johns, Jason Fabok's like story like underrated or surprising. And I know I say that, and we're talking about. I'm getting ahead of myself. The runner-ups first. Quite a few Mad Cave titles here for me. Kosher Mafia, Dick Tracy, Flash Gordon.
Yes.
Like Dick Tracy and Flash Gordon especially didn't expect it. Kosher Mafia, I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll check it out. Wow, that has been a really good series. Then also X Factor. Like when we see Mark Russell and Bob Quinn, obviously they've worked together before. We've talked to both guys in the show previously. Yes, like I want to check out their stuff when they're working together. But at the same time, it's like X Factor, I don't know. That has been an awesome series. Somna. And again, as much as we're dealing with like Becky Cloonan and Tula Lotay, outstanding storytellers and comic creators, like I didn't expect like that series like knocked my socks off. But the one that for me, more so on the most surprising book of 2024 end of the spectrum was Dark Horse Comics Helen of Windhorn. This is by Tom King and Bilquis Evely with colors by Matthias Lopes. And honestly, I could start with just doing a whole bit on Matthias Lopes colors. Like, holy shit. Like, look, this is the team that did Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. So like we knew the quality that we're getting. This is why I called dibs on this, because I knew I liked that series. I had a feeling this was going to be good, but I was like, holy shit, man. Like I am so immersed in this. Like this is one of those things where it's like, when you talk about like the die effect, where it's like we need to have time and just like not be distracted, sit down and focus on this. I've gotten better about like making that time, like carving that out for me. And I think that's mostly been because of Helen of Windhorn, because it was so friggin' good. Like it's a fantasy adventure story. And I got to be careful about how much detail I want to get into. I do want to save some for when I talk about it on the show. But like we have this like wild child daughter of an author who's now living with her grandfather, who's unlike any elderly man you've ever met in your life. And honestly, Joe, when you talk about like the fantasy scratching that fantasy itch for you, you're gonna be like, God, I can't believe I like didn't get to read this series while it was ongoing. You'll be happy to binge the shit out of it. But it is Helen of Windhorn, man. It was a beautiful like Bilquis Evely and Matthias Lopes. Oh my God, what an amazing team! Like an art team, and it's unlike anything you're seeing in comics. And I know we say that so much, but this is part of why this is such a good time in comics, because it's like we're not just getting cool superhero stuff. We're getting a lot of different art styles and a lot of different story types as well. So yeah, so those are our 4 series winners. Some awesome selections there, and some great runner-ups. And there's also great books that we didn't mention that we've raved about throughout the course of it, quite honestly. We didn't talk about the absolute titles, and like those deserve to be in the conversation in some capacity. Wonder Woman, most specifically,
came out a little too late in the year, right?
Exactly. If that would, it's really like we maybe we should stretch out our it has to come out in September, because I don't know, because like we're never going to say if we got 3 issues of a series is going to win any of our awards. I don't think either of us will ever say that. But anyways, that's a conversation for another day. We can resolve that another time. Let's get to our individual creator awards, and we can start off with the new one, Joe, for Breakout Creator of 2024.
Yeah, so I came up with the idea of creating 2 new awards, right? Best limited series, because that one should have been a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
But Breakout Creator, and I created this award specifically for the 2 writers that I'm about to mention, my runner-up and my winner, because they both knocked my socks off. And I chose one over the other only because the writer had just put out like more books that year than the other, right? And books that were really effing good. But it was these 2 writers primarily that sparked me to create this award. So my runner-up for 2024 Breakout Creator was Gary Maloney. We had Gary on the show, Irish writer. When the Blood Is Dried was his debut sort of how do I want to phrase this? Like big publisher book. Now he's written a lot of stuff over in Ireland, and he's really popular over there. Great friends with Declan Shalvey, I believe, and so he's done a lot of stuff over there. So this was his first sort of breakout book, sort of globally, if you will, especially here in the States. And I just absolutely love this book. And I read it and I said, you got to read it. We got to have Gary on. And he was such a joy to talk to. and he's been a great supporter of the show. And I know I think we've both talked to him a number of times, just through DMs and stuff like that. But I had a hard time. I was going back and forth, but for me, ultimately, my 2024 winner for Breakout Creator was Dan Waters, because of the work he's done all year long. He's just had a number of just great books. And I gotta pull this up because I don't know why I didn't write it down in this document, but I wrote it down in my notes because let's see.
But yeah, I understand why you like Dan Waters is 100. Like that's another person that you've raved about a ton. Like that's someone that should be winning an award in your books.
Yeah. Where the fuck did I put this? I gotta fucking oh, here we go. Okay. So breakout. So Six Fingers, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Destro, and now he's writing Nightwing.
There you
Right.
go.
And his start on Nightwing has been absolutely epic. So like I've become such a fan of Dan Waters. He's quickly become one of those names. I see his name on a book, I'm reading it. Right. So for me, like that's why I chose Dan, over Gary, just because he had a lot more things out this year. And I know that Gary has got a few more things coming out in 2025. So we're looking forward to that. And I'm really looking forward to following Gary's career and seeing it should explode because he's an absolute tremendous writer. So I'm glad we have this award now. And huge props to Gary and huge props to Dan for just writing some kick. Like Destro, I never would have read a fucking Destro book. But Dan Waters' name was on it. It's in the Energon universe, and I fucking love that. I love what he did. That series was so fucking violent and so sinister. Destro, he made Destro such a great villain. That like, come on, if you make me give a shit about Destro, you're doing something right.
Yeah, no, that's I very like this for you makes 100% sense. Like, and I understand you not wanting to give it to not giving it to Gary in this situation, but obviously he could earn it for you next year because there are a couple like with any award. I feel like whenever we talk about like MVP in sports, it's like, well, like there's the argument of like this is the best player in the game right now. He or she should be winning MVP every single year, but it's like, well, someone pops off for that year and they were a little bit better. So like there's different ways to look at any kind of award. And that's the same case with Breakout Creator of 2024. And as you mentioned, this is new this year. We did not have this in 2023, but if we did have it in 2023, I'm going to retroactively say this, Joe. Griffin Sheridan and Ethan S. Parker are our winners for 2023. 100%.
I would agree with you at 100%. 100%.
For Kill Your Darlings, outstanding. That book got so much praise, deservedly so. Friggin' outstanding. Obviously was great this year as well. Talked to those guys a ton previously. I think Patrick Horvath is another interesting person for that mix too. But again, like just like as far as I know, primarily the one book, obviously an outstanding book, but another one that could be in the conversation for this year. But for me, it does go to Gary Maloney for Breakout Creator of 2024, because I was blown away by how much he impacted you when you read this series. That alone was like, who is this? Like, who is writing this series that like is taking like impacting Joe and still impacting you to this day? And then I went and read the series like, oh, I get it. This is so freaking awesome. I had so much fun with this because I like fantasy. Like right now, I wouldn't say I look for fantasy stuff the most, but like that was my favorite shit as a kid too, 1,000%. So like when I read this, I was like, God damn, man, like this, it feels so lived in. When the Blood Has Dried, of course, the Mad Cave Studios title. Like that's so, it's not easy to do. And for like someone who is like, getting their first like big break, to me, like, he did an outstanding job. I hope we get to see more of When the Blood Has Dried. And also, like, I do want to note too, like, he's in the same, Snyder class that I am with Substack. So like, it's a little, I like seeing, a classmate, go off and do well. So I'm very happy for him, and I can't wait to see what else he has cooking for 2025. But yeah, for me, when I saw this Breakout Creator Award, it's like, who's someone that like, because you can say the same thing about Dan Waters, though, like how you viewed it. Like you hadn't read Dan Waters stuff before, at least not knowingly. And it's like this guy just, and it's not like it's like, oh, I haven't read Tom Taylor stuff before, but no, he's been around for a long time. Like, it's a little bit different. Like this is someone who's like maybe been around but leveled up in a big way. So like there's two different ways to go about this award 100%. But yeah, so Dan Waters and Gary Maloney are the TLDR breakout creators of 2024. Then we get to the best cover artist from 2024. That is the Jim Lee floppy.
So this one, there's my runners up here, because I always love their covers for the series for when it was Stray Dogs and Feral, is Fleece and Forstner, right?
Oh, great call.
Right, they do great covers, great homage covers. Scotty Young, I'm always a sucker. I don't typically buy books that I'm not reading. But when I see a Scotty Young cover that tickles my fancy, I'll grab it, because I love his artwork so much. Tula Lote, again, it's just another absolutely beautiful artist that does brilliant covers. Capullo is one of the greats. I love Declan Shalvey's cover work, but for me, there's been one guy that stands out, and one and generally when I make our Instagram posts for what's new, if I see that this person has done a cover for one of the books that I've picked, I'm using his cover. No questions asked. He was my 2023 winner, and he is a repeat winner, baby. 2-time floppy winner, Dan Panosian. This was to me like, okay, it was Dan, and then I'm like, let me see, was there anyone else that really blows me away? And there are some art, there's been some great cover art, but no one really, I mean, to me, this past year and last year is consistent as Dan Panosian, and primarily a lot of his stuff that he's done for Batman, especially some of the absolute Batman covers that he did, just absolutely knocked my fucking socks off.
It's, you raised the note about Tony and Trish, and if we were talking about best covers for a series, I think Feral would win that conversation, because they consistently just have awesome stuff. Like obviously with the Big Two, we see some cool shit, but I love those homage covers that they have. It just everything about that series. But when you're talking about individuals, for me, I'm with you on Scotty Young 100%. I think he's someone for everybody who's like, if you like Scotty's style, he's always going to be one of your favorite cover artists. For me, and this is a guy who probably could have, like, to me, it was, I couldn't put him in the breakout creator conversation, but maybe there's an argument to be made just because of how much of an impact he had on me for this series. But Oliver Barrett, who was doing the covers for Kill All Immortals, when I saw his cover for issue 1, I was like, dibs, 100%. I don't need to know anything else. I don't need to know a single fucking thing. I am reading that shit. That looks so damn good. Then I saw Zach, and then I saw Fico, and I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. Like I'm all in on this series. Like, the cover artist's number one job, as far as I know, is like draw a kick-ass cover that's going to make someone want to buy this without having to look at anything else. They don't need to know.
Make you judge a book by its cover. That's literally their job.
Exactly, right? In a positive way. And like Oliver Barrett, like 100% does that with this series. So like I hope we see more from him in the cover game. I think his first, like, this was like a breakout year for him as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in this conversation going down the line. But Joe, this is one of our 2 unanimous floppy winners. Dan Panosian, 100%, man. Like, there's a lot of great covers out there, but it's just every time, like, Dan does a really good job of teasing his stuff on his socials, where like he puts out like a certain corner of an image and whatever. That's like we see all of it. And it's like, God, man, it's just one banger after a friggin' another. You mentioned the absolute titles. He's done a lot of. I don't know if he's done every title for Vicarious so far, but he's done at least 2. He did which is Ryan Parrott's joint over at Boom Studios. He did some Dick Tracy stuff. He did the Sanction, that first cover. It's like, holy shit!
Yes.
Dark Knights of Steel, All Winter, Flash. When I first saw his Flash Gordon, I was like, I'm checking out Flash Gordon 100%. Like, I knew he wasn't new in the interiors, but I was like, fuck, man, that looks great. He did some TMNT stuff. Like, he's just done. And that's just, I'm sure he's done more. That's still plenty. Like that's enough right there.
That's quad flops.
Yeah.
Quad flops.
Yep.
100. Panosian.
And he 100%. So he is the leading, if we were keeping a tally, the leading floppy winner at this point. I have documentation of all my stuff back to 20 20, I think, like when we first did it. But we're not keeping a leaderboard on this. Maybe we should, though. But yes, Dan Panosian, the unanimous winner for best cover artist in 2024. And that one, like for both of us, it was just very, very front of mind. Just Dan just absolutely killing it right now. And again, can't wait to see his new The Last Boy, his new series over at Boom Studios. All right, speaking of artists, let's go over to the Jack Kirby Award for the best interior artist of 2024. Joe, who do you got?
So my 2023 winner was Alex Cormack. It was his work, on Sync. It's his work with Rich Duick. Just there's a grittiness, there's a rawness to his art. There's a horror to his art. He was one of the kindest guys we've had on the show. Very, very mild mannered, and his art fucks me up so bad, which I know he takes as an absolute compliment. And this year's winner couldn't be any more opposite of his art style. But before I get into the winner for my Jack Kirby floppy, my runners up was Fico Ossio. Again, talked about how beautiful his art has been on Kill All Immortals. John Pearson. Again, here's another. This could have been a potential winner for best breakout creator because it doesn't have to be writer. It could be artist as well. These people are creating, right? And Pearson's art on the Immortals and just the stuff that I'm becoming more and more familiar with his art, and I love it. There's just something that's it's very gravitating, right? If that makes sense, pulls you right in. Hayden Sherman, we've talked about Hayden a lot during this past year. His work on Absolute Wonder Woman. This is someone who I was first introduced to on Thumbs with Sean Lewis. And when we first had Sean on, he raved and mentioned how Hayden's going to blow up. And here he is. He's blowing up, and deservedly so. But I mentioned this book earlier. I raved about this art earlier. And for me, there's a lot of great artists out there. I just mentioned a bunch. But for me, my 2024 Jack Kirby floppy for best artist is Derek Kirk Kim for his work on The Last Mermaid. This book is beautiful. Every page is like a painting. It's the colors are vibrant, the lines are clean, the action sequences pull you in. It's just there's beautiful stuff. The first several pages of The Last Mermaid have little to no dialogue. It's just the art pulling you into this landscape, pulling you into this universe and telling its story just through the visuals. This is a book that blew me away with its writing, its storytelling, its setting, and its art. And that is such an amazing thing to do. And I can't wait for the next art of The Last Mermaid. I can't wait to get more from Derek Kirk Kim. He could have also won best breakout creator for me. This is a guy that I know he's done some work in the past, some really beautiful stuff in the past, some very critically acclaimed stuff in the past. But for me, this was my first introduction to him. This was such a great story. And it was, as you mentioned, we met him at C2E2, and he was very gracious and took a lot of time, with us. And was very happy to see us each time that we stopped by, his booth. And has been very supportive, of our show as well. And I just can't get over how much the art in The Last Mermaid blew me away, and so I'm very, very pleased. And it's again, it was a no-brainer. Once I thought about it, I go, bam, DKK, he's my winner.
Nice, nice. I love that pick because this is the one that you've talked about the series and obviously enjoyed the story, but you have raved about the art throughout this series in a way that you do on few other books. For me, you mentioned Alex Cormack. He also was my winner from last year. That was one of our. I think we also had 2 unanimous picks last year. And obviously Alex does an outstanding job. But I will say, if you remember one of my runners-ups from last year, that runner-up is the winner this year. I'll get to that in a second. My runner-ups for 2024, Jorge Corona. God, I loved what he did on Ain't No Grave. And obviously he did stuff with Zach Kaplan on Beyond Real as well. That was awesome. Bill Quist Evely, mentioned before. Helen of Windhorn, outstanding. Jason Fabuk, I mean, the dude friggin' kicks ass. Obviously, Three Jokers was friggin' outstanding, and then he goes and does Rook Exodus. It's like, my goodness. Aaron Campbell, loved everything he did on Constantine, Hellblazer Dead in America. Obviously, there's just, the obligatory, someone has to mention Dan Mora in the conversation because he just does so much impressive artwork. But for me, the 2024 Jack Kirby floppy goes to Bob Quinn for his work on Kill Your Darlings and X Factor, because we talked so much about Kill Your Darlings in the sense of like with his art and how we have this like scary, haunting, chilling like artwork that we're seeing, and then you have these cute cuddly characters. And I'm sure everybody's like, we heard you guys talk about the cuddly characters of fucking enough by now. But I can't, like, it was amazing how it all fit so well in the story. And just the way the series ends and everything is big, it's loud, it's bombastic, all this stuff. And just Bob go like every issue, it seemed like he leveled up, and he's already a very impressive artist. And then on top of that, for me, why like so that alone might have won him the award. But what was really big for me was he kicked ass on that. And then he goes over and does X Factor. He's doing a big 2-book, which is he's not, it's not new for him. But he goes and does that, and he still is able. Like I still feel like I'm getting that Bob Quinn touch, but it's like he's morphing for the big 2 in a way that like he's not sacrificing what he does, but he's also fitting the story, fitting the X world and everything. And I just, to me, like to be able to do those two things like in like one fell swoop, and we know how hard this guy works, like it's really impressive to me how good of a job and how seamless of a job he did while still being true to his art style. So he had a lot going on, and I really respect being able to juggle a lot and then execute in a way that just is so like without losing yourself in the transition. But yeah, like Kill Your Darlings is just is what really like was the leading force, but that X Factor is what for me was like what pushed him over the line, because all the artists I'm talking about there, like they did outstanding work on their series, and I mean the ones you're talking about as well, Joe. So again, just these are we're a broken record, but there's a lot of tough decisions to be made in these categories. But I will say, while there are a lot of worthy candidates in this next category, Joe, I'll let you go first, as you have been. This is number 2 on the unanimous decisions as we move to the 2024 Stanley Award for Best Writer.
I think our last 2 picks are unanimous.
Oh, this is true. That's right. That's right. Yep. My apologies.
And this was an absolute no-brainer for me. I kind of knew this from the first issue. I read, and I knew this was, this is the one that kind of sealed it for me, when I read the first issue of Kill All Immortals. But my 2023 winner, right, for the Stanley floppy was James Tynion. No surprise there. My runner-up for this year was Dan Waters, right, because he blew me away this year. But like, I knew who this winner was going to be very early on, and it was only solidified when after I read the first issue of Kill All Immortals, and that's Zach Kaplan. What a hell of a year he's had. Beyond Real, Kill All Immortals, The Midnight Shadow. What was the other one there?
Dark Empty Void.
Thank you, Dark Empty Void. Right, just another brilliant claustrophobic story. So we had Zach on a couple of times this past year too, and he's also been very gracious and very supportive of the show, and he's just written some absolute dynamite books, Nicholas. And I remember reading Beyond Real and just like, man, this book is trippy. It is so effing good. And Kill All Immortals has just been like next level stuff. So for me, Zach Kaplan, you fucking earned it, man. This has been a hell of a year for you. I can't wait to see what 2025 brings. This was just, there were some great books I read from you this year, man. And I knew this you were going to be the winner of this award very early on.
This was I have a lot of like people who like are deserving of being mentioned, and I'll get to that in a second, but this was one of the easier choices for me because Zach showed a ton of range this year. And you mentioned all of his books. He's got 4 titles that we enjoyed one after the other after the other. And it's just in I like he just knocked our socks off at every single turn. And look, I know Kill Immortals didn't end up winning an award, but that one is an elite book for me. Sorry, from me. It definitely got the short end of the stick in my conversations, but like that's an elite book for me. Like any other year, that's winning an award. Like we gave out 4 awards. Like if we had a category for like didn't have a specific award but should have won something like that, like Kill All Immortals is 100%. That's why it was a runner up twice, like because it's like I want to emphasize like this I really enjoyed that series, and I enjoyed the other ones too. Like I can't like Dark Empty Void did not qualify for an award this year because it only had 2 issues come out, as much as it did come out earlier in the year. I'm very excited to see more of that. Those first 2 issues were very promising. Beyond Real, very deep. The Midnight Shadows, like we get like we like a refreshing approach on nostalgia. I love that. And again, like I love listening to the music as I'm reading that story too. So just awesome stuff from Zach. Like without question, our winner for like best writer of the year, the 2024 Stanley Award winner. I do want to mention the other people that I had in consideration. Kieran Gillen did an outstanding job this year. Tony Fleece with Feral and Local Man and why am I blanking on Uncanny Valley? Like
Yes.
all 3 of them just had so much fun with them. Benjamin Percy, who was my 2023 award winner. I've raved a ton about Cy Spurrier and what he did on Constantine. I loved his work on that. And then other like those are the guys that were like really in that final grouping for me. But like Scotty Young, Jason Aaron, Jeff Johns, Rick Remender, like all of those individuals deserve credit for the work that they did this year as well. But so just again, like an awesome year, a lot of great candidates. But Joe, before we do a quick look back on like other stuff related to the show this year, we got to do the MVP for most valuable publisher. And you were correct. Math is not the strong suit of the TLDR Comic Book Club program. Neither is enunciation or pronunciation or whatever you want to freaking call it. But we do know that we have a unanimous winner here as well, just like we did in 2023.
Yeah, and I think both our runners-up were also the same as well. So in 2023, our MVP, our most valuable publisher, was AWA. I mean, no one had a better year than them, right? And it wasn't necessarily about volume; it was about quality, and they didn't miss with a single title in 2023. Nor did our winner this year, if we're being honest. This was a much closer, there a tougher decision, I should say, for me. I don't know how about you, but for me, it was pretty tough because both of these studios really knocked my socks off this year. They both just absolutely crushed it. My runner-up for the MVP in 2024 was Dark Horse Comics. I did read more books by them, but inherently they just put more books out over the course of the year. And I loved a lot of their books. I mean, we've talked about Kill All Immortals. We've talked about
The Midnight Shadows.
The Midnight Shadows. We've talked about, we've talked a lot of Dark
All
Horse
Eight Eyes.
books. Right. Yeah. Right. They had a really great year. But for me, my MVP for 2024 is Mad Cave Studios. Again, there was a lot of quality over quantity. I think what ultimately decided for me was that there were more impactful books that I read from Mad Cave than there were from Dark Horse. There were a lot of great titles from Dark Horse that I read, but there was more from Mad Cave that either blew me away. I didn't expect. I'm much newer to Mad Cave. Shame on me. It's their 10-year anniversary. We should have been on them a lot earlier than we have been, but it was a really great year for them. And a lot of great creators were over there writing books. We talked about Gary Maloney, right? And we've talked about Tim Daniel and DB Andre, and we talked about Flash Gordon being an absolute surprise. Like, never in a million years would I have read a Flash Gordon book, but I think because it was at Mad Cave Studios, I said I'm going to give it a shot, right? And that's what you want. So I'm very happy to pick Mad Cave Studios. for my MVP. And because, as you said, it's unanimous, you did as well. But I want to know how close, Nicholas, this was for you in Dark Horse.
Yeah, so you are correct that Dark Horse was my number two. Image comes in at number three, and I think we've talked about this before. Like when it comes to like, and maybe this is another conversation of like, do we have two different awards for publishers? Because there's the big, people call it the big two, but it's really the big three, and then
Mm.
you have all the publishers that are just a little bit smaller. And like Image is of the big three for me. It's like for both of us, right? You
There's a way we could break this one down.
yeah,
Definitely.
but Image is definitely wins that conversation between the three for me. But when you
Mhm.
look at like we talk about, like we're looking at batting average in this. Like slugging percentage is obviously important, like how what much we love the series, but like how much of the stuff that you put out are we checking out and enjoying? And Dark Horse, it was really close. So like I'm right there like with you. It's just in the end for me, I think part of it is I can't ignore that conversations that we have with creators too, that Mad Cave is just doing so much right in a time where obviously Dark Horse has been around for so long, and so has Image. But and some other publishers have been around for a long time too. But in a time where we're seeing a lot of new publishers pop up, and it's just like, oh, are they in it for comics, or are they in it for like turning comics into another medium, like using it as a jumping on point or whatever? Where Mad Cave again has been around for 10 years, but still newer in the business. To me, like you'll see Tim Daniel if you follow him on Twitter or Blue Sky, he tweets about it all the time. Like they are all about creating good comics. It is very evident. Like I love what they've been doing. Like we mentioned some of the titles, but just to reiterate in case you didn't catch these, Final Arc of Nottingham, the Devil That Wears My Face, like wrapped this year. Morningstar, Kosher Mafia, Dick Tracy, Flash Gordon, Dark Empty Void, The When the Blood Is Dried, and The Last Wardens. I mean,
Yes.
all of those series, if you like, they have all been fun, interesting for very different reasons. And then when I look at those, honestly, Joe, I don't know in any of those titles. I don't think there's any like similarities. Like the closest thing to a similarity is like Dick Tracy and Flash Gordon are based on old characters.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as close as it gets. Maybe Flash Gordon and Dark Empty Void are sci-fi, but they're such different sci-fi stories too.
Oh,
Like so,
yeah.
it's just that you're getting a lot there, and I think if you've been sleeping on Mad Cave, don't worry, it's not too late. But get in on it because you're missing out on. It's been a great year in comics, and if you honestly like, you could have only been reading from one publisher all year and probably having a really fun time. But like if you're not reading indies, I don't know how you found the show, but if
Mm.
you're not reading indies, then like you're missing out because like Mad Cave and Dark Horse both had friggin' outstanding 2024s, and just reading them alone, you would have been satisfied.
And Mad Cave's done a great job at giving lesser known creators a shot, right?
Hmm.
Gary Maloney, right? I wasn't familiar with Elliot Spurler, Tischler, before. I was very familiar with DB Andrew because I loved his book Resonant, and the pairing of him and Tim Daniel. I love it, right? It's just giving us another great avenue, great new books, great new things to look forward to. So like, I'm always excited when our review copies come in each week because I can't wait to see what's in that Mad Cave folder.
Hmm.
Because there's a good chance I'm going to read everything that's in it, and that's all you can ask for.
100%. So that brings the 2024 floppies to a conclusion, Joe. But let's give everybody a quick recap in case they want to document what our picks were for this year. So take us through all of your winners.
Okay, so my saga floppy for best ongoing series of 2024 goes to Transformers. My Once and Future award for best new series of 2024 goes to Kill All Immortals. My 2024 floppy for best limited series goes to The One Hand and the Six Fingers. My Hawkeye floppy for most underrated and surprising book of 2024 goes to Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. My breakout creator of 2024 was Dan Waters. My Jim Lee floppy for best cover artist goes to Dan Panosian, repeat winner. Let's go. My Jack Kirby floppy for best artist of 2024 goes to the brilliant and beautiful artist and comic creator Derek Kirk Kim. My Stan Lee floppy for best writer of 2024 goes to Zach Kaplan. And my MVP, my most valuable publisher in 2024, was Mad Cave Studios.
For my saga floppy for best ongoing series of 2024, that goes to The Power Fantasy. The Once in the Future Award for best new series of 2024 goes to Rook Exodus. Best limited series of 2024 goes to Constantine Dead in America. The Hawkeye floppy for most underrated or most surprising book of 2024 goes to Helen of Windhorn. Breakout creator of 2024 goes to Gary Maloney. Jim Floppy for Jim Lee Floppy for best cover artist. Just Jim. We're just naming after a random guy named Jim. Jim Lee Floppy.
Oh, floppy Jim.
For best cover artist from 2024. Joe already mentioned him, so I don't mind screwing this one up. Repeat winner, Dan Panosian. Jack Kirby Floppy for best artist from 2024 goes to Bob Quinn. Stan Lee Floppy for best writer from 2024 goes to Zach Kaplan. The most valuable publisher of the year, the MVP for 2024, goes to Mad Cave Studios. Well, Joe, I think we covered a lot of ground. I know we did want to do a little reflecting. We've gone long, but that's what happens with award season. It's not going to be quick and tight like most of our episodes. But I do want to note for the people, for those who are curious, we ended up having 22 interview episodes throughout the course of the year. We ended up having 16 recommendation episodes, so mainline episodes for those who keep track at home. So that's 32 recommendations throughout the year. I did mention that earlier in the program. For our interviews, we ended up having 22 episodes, but we had 28 guests on the show, 16 of which were newcomers, Joe. So I think I haven't kept track, or rather, I haven't checked on what happened in 2023. I think we had a few more interviews, not much more. Like this is kind of we want 20 to 25. Any more than that, like we don't want to step too much.
And that's half the year we're doing interviews.
100%. Right? Exactly. And when you factor in solicits, like we don't want to step too much on, the interviews. I think, the mainline episodes. I think 10, any less than 10, we'd be like, what the hell are we doing? And obviously we did a lot in spooky season, so that kind of helped pick up the slack a little bit. But in terms of new guests, I feel like percentage-wise, we actually had a little bit more of that this year. I wouldn't be stunned if that percentage of like new guests takes a hit in 2025, just because we already know people we want to have on for next year. We've already been thinking about it with these new titles that have been announced, and these are people that we've had on the show previously. So I also wouldn't be surprised if that number 22 interviews goes up a bit. But that's not a bad thing. Like we always love talking to all different creators and getting all their insights. But it's been another friggin' fun year, dude.
Well, I'll tell you, the chats has become my favorite thing, and it's nothing that I've said this before. It's nothing that I ever expected to do when we started doing this. This was a pandemic thing where I just wanted to talk comics with someone, and here we are 5 years later, and not only have we had repeat. I'm gonna brag a little bit, but not only have we had repeat guests, but we're having guests asking to come on the show, which I never would have imagined. I felt like we'd always be sort of clawing and begging, to get guests. And when creators are asking to come back on and they say, hey, I got this new book, want to promote it, that means the absolute world to me. And we've had a really great growth spurt this year, something I haven't experienced since fourth grade, and it only lasted for about 6 months. But we've seen, I'm looking forward to continue to grow on YouTube, and we've and all the other socials. It's just, I am absolutely honored anytime a guest comes on our show, and especially when they approach us and say, hey, I've got this new book, would you mind checking it out? We'd love to come on the show and talk about it, because I love talking to creators. I love their process. I'm very fascinated about a writer and an artist's process, because that is something I lack. I don't have that creativity. And whether it's whether it's a comic book artist or a writer, or whether it's a chef or just in general, they see things that are out of the box. They're able to put these things together. I lack that ability, and I'm just so fascinated by it. I love talking shop with everyone. So it was a fun year for that. I'm looking forward to what 2025 brings. And just in general, I'm very proud of what the show has become, where the show has, gone from where we started to where we are now, and where we'll go over the next 5 years. It's a big benchmark. 5 years, Nicholas. Holy shit.
Yeah. We get so I'm happy about this because like anytime you're trying to do you're trying to build something or do something that's difficult, like you have to be focused on what's in front of you and like executing when you need to, and then like planning, for what's next and everything like that, and plotting. And we definitely do that. That's not an issue for us at all. We do a good job. One of us is always finding a moment to reflect on something, thankfully. But like it is like I didn't think of, like this is a moment where I didn't do it. Like I didn't think like this is our fifth floppies. Like we've done awards.
Yeah.
We've done it for 5 years. It's pretty freaking crazy. I mean, like it's not lost on me how far we've come, but it is like, oh, we've been doing this for a minute. Holy shit. So yeah, and there's nobody I'd rather be doing it with. Like it's been so much fun, and just like continuing to make this grow. And I like, 2025 is promising to be another, great year in comics after 2024 was so damn good. And I think TLDR is going to be a part of that. So make sure, if you haven't already, you tell a fellow comic book reader to check out the show. It helps us out a ton. And it helps the creators that you guys like a lot. It helps them out a ton too, as more people get to know their books and read their stuff as it's ongoing. Because that's what it's all about. Joe and I ultimately have a lot of fun with this, but we also care about the medium a ton. And this is a way in which we can give back to it in some capacity. So with that, Joe, Happy New Year to my friend. And until next year, stay sexy.
You know it, baby. Oh, and keep reading. It's 2025. Don't stop reading, baby.